When I introduce you, I couldn't say. Do you want some water? You, you have to write the voice because the microphone is over here. But we have a stand-up microphone. I'm gonna try it. Really thank you.
Sí, 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 sí. Sí, sí, sí. Sí. ¿Por qué no escuchas? Sí, 2, 3. Sí, sí. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Sí, sí, sí. Sí, sí. Sí, sí, sí. Sí, sí. Sí, sí, sí. No se puede. Sí, sí, sí. Sí, 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 sí. ¿Ahora se escucha? ¿Está encendida ya? Sí, sí, sí. Sí, sí. Sí, sí.
Very good morning. Thank you for coming back. Happy to see you all again. We're going to start today. The conference, all the conference today are going to be in English. We have the pleasure of having here, I don't know the name. Teja Tilikainen. All right. It's not very easy for a Spanish to say a name that difficult for me. Teja is the director of the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats, and previously she was the director of the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, and also she has been the director of the Network of the European Studies at the University of Helsinki. Mr. Tilikainen also served as Secretary of State at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland from 2007 to 2008. Also, she was member of the Parliament, of the European Convention in 2002, 2003, and a member of the panel of eminent person on European security as a common project led by Ambassador, I don't know how to say? Isinger, sorry, in 2015, 2016. You all know when I'm in the classes, it's very difficult for me to pronounce correctly, even the Spanish surname. I'm really sorry for the spelling. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We are looking forward to listen to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I ask to be able to use this microphone so that I can stand. The most important information, of course, was not included in my CV. That was that I was a visiting lecturer at the Complutense University for one term in 2007, I think. So, summer term. That was the important thing. It's a pleasure for me to be here to give you a short introduction from my point of view to how we should understand this phenomenon called hybrid threats. I will walk you through some key topics that we, I think, need to deal with when we try to figure out how to respond to this form of threats, how to protect our societies against this not necessarily entirely new type of threat, but in this new environment. I know that you have been discussing cyber, for instance. In this new technological environment, we have been highly vulnerable for these strategies that the threat actors are using. You can, yes, please. So I don't know if you can see this font. It's small, but I want to make an argument here to give a structure to my presentation. So what I'm saying here is to counter hybrid threats, we need to enhance our understanding on actors and their strategies. That's one thing. So why do certain actors use this tool that we call hybrid threats against mainly our democratic societies? So what is behind the actors' strategies? Who are, first of all, these actors, and what do they want to achieve in particular when they use these tools? And the next thing that we need to understand to be able to protect us is exactly the tools, because the tools are not necessarily that visible. They use covert tools, they use tools that differ from what we have been used to, what we are expecting from actors that are projecting power. And then as the last topic, the domains in our societies that are targeted. That's also important. Actors, their strategies, the tools that they are using. Maybe I would also add the tactics, because it's very important in the hybrid threat context to understand the tactics that they use, and then at our end, the societal domains that are targeted. We can wait 1 second. Oh, yes, no worries. Let's start with the actors. We could say that there are, you know, from the literature and from journalism, that we have decided to call this epoch an epoch of transition. So transition meaning that not only the balance of power, global balance of power is changing. In that context, we talk about the unilateral balance of power, bipolar balance of power, multipolar balance of power. This is a little bit old-fashioned, but I think it makes sense still to see the balance of power in these terms. But also there is another transition going on, and that deals with the rules and norms of our international order. I want to challenge the argument that this would be that we would be heading towards an era where all the rules and norms are contested and challenged. This is not the way I see the situation. The thing is that the rules and norms that we were used to having, that are based on our values and our worldviews, those are contested. But there are new rules and norms in the making. So this transition at the global stage is how we have characterized our current era. And in this global transition of power, balance of power, rules and norms, we tend to refer to actors that take a revisionist approach to the existing international order. Revisionist approach meaning that they are seeking a change to the international order and to the global balance of power as well. And we need to go back to this global stage, to this transition, and this revisionist efforts to change the global balance of power, to understand what hybrid threats are, how we contextualize hybrid threats. So now, thank you. No one can see this font, so only the colleagues in the first rows. I'm sorry. So I'm saying here, I try to summarize the things in this change or transition that are important for us when we try to understand actors and their strategies in the use of hybrid threats. So I'm saying here that actors such as Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and their allies are seeking to change the international order. Yes, this is very true. This is their ultimate foreign policy goal, to achieve a change that would be more beneficial for these actors and their values. This is very important to understand. They would like to achieve an order that would empower them and make them stronger. Now the current order, as they see, is beneficial for Western actors, for us, and also, of course, for the United States as the leading country of this post-Cold War order. What do they want to achieve in detail? What does China, which is the leading actor in this campaign, and I would also argue that the leading actor when it comes to using hybrid threat tools against democratic societies. China is by far the most or the best resourced, the highly strategic actor, and that has clear plans, clear revisionist plans, and that is using in a strategic and planned manner the tools that we call hybrid threats. So what does China want to achieve in this transition? And I define Chinese goals here. China's long-term project is to become the leading power to which all other powers would be attached. So to achieve a China-centric world. This is very far from our understanding of the multilateral international order where equality among sovereign states prevails in legal terms. All sovereign states are equal. This is our understanding of how the world should look like. But the Chinese dream goes back to its history, its kind of philosophical understanding of how global harmony can be achieved with the help of a central power. This is the Chinese long-term project. Russia, again, is another revisionist power, very much going against the West, very aggressively using tools, traditional tools of power projection, open warfare, political tools, less economic tools, energy, yes, and a lot of hybrid threat tools that we call hybrid threat tools. I get back to them, but I know that you have had a definition on hybrid threats yesterday. Russia is not that well resourced. It's a nuclear power. It is using that card, but the world that the global order that Russia would like to establish is a multipolar order led by a concert of great powers, and of course Russia sees itself as one of those leading powers in that kind of a group which would define the rules for the others. This is what the Russian argument is. Great powers should be more privileged than small powers. Great powers should be privileged to have a sphere of influence in their surroundings where they could then exert power and define the room for maneuver for its neighbors. And this is exactly what Russia is doing with its open warfare against Ukraine. It is trying to define the limits of Ukrainian foreign and security policy because it thinks, of course, it says that there is no right for Ukraine to exist as a sovereign state at all, but it also thinks that as Ukraine forms a part of the sphere of influence of Russia, Russia should have a privilege to decide on the foreign policy of Ukraine, and as well as and all the other countries belonging to this sphere of influence. And what we see what is very crucial for this transition and for the use of hybrid threats is that even if these revisionist states come to this picture with very different backgrounds, with very different aims when it comes to the ultimate goal, what they can agree on is that they need to go against the West to challenge and contest this existing order. And they have been quite successful in aligning themselves, finding forms of cooperation for this. And we might have the BRICS cooperation in mind, which is certainly used as one of the strategic tools for their alignment. But also, of course, the bilateral strategic relationship between China and Russia, which is a very powerful tool in changing the current world order. Yes, this should not be forgotten, and I have not mentioned it. Of course, the worst enemy for these revisionist states, which most of them are authoritarian states, the worst enemy is maybe not a state like the US. The worst enemy is democracy and the democratic principles and practices. We all know what would happen if these principles and democratic values would start spreading around in China, in Russia, in North Korea. That would be detrimental for the regime's survival, and that's why democratic practices and our democratic values are at the core of their strategies when they attack the Western-led global order and our societies. So this is something very important to be kept in mind. Goal to undermine democracy is a part of their efforts to weaken the West. So that's why we see a lot of hybrid threats against elections, electoral campaigns, election security, information space, topics and fields related to democratic practices, because they want to weaken, decrease trust in these values, in these practices, and they want to make democracy look bad, inefficient, hypocritical, not to, in order to discourage their own populations to support these models. So I'm still discussing the actors here, but because the actors' strategies, of course, are the key here when it comes to using and creating these hybrid threat tools. So when Russia and China argue that the world should look different, it should look more multipolar, and as you might have noticed, they also argue that the global order should be more democratic. It's a little bit ironic from their point of view, but they argue that states and populations in the global south should be given more power, more possibilities to take part in global decision making. When they make this argument, they create a very powerful narrative about what the West is doing. And the narrative is that the West is targeting authoritarian states. They don't call themselves authoritarian, but the West, they are the victims. Russia and China are the victims of the power projection of the collective West, as they put it. So they are the victim, they are the target, and Western states are projecting their power. Western states are interfering into their societies to promote their power. So from this, it's quite easy to draw the conclusion that they need to defend themselves against the hostile West. And now we come to hybrid threats, because this is the key point. They are arguing, both Russia and China are arguing very visibly in their doctrines, in their strategies, that they are in the middle of a defensive battle where they are defending their political integrity, their historical integrity, their right to a stronger position at the international level against the hostile colonial West. So they turn things around, which we need to understand the power of this narrative in order to understand, for instance, the domestic support that still exists in Russia for the Russian warfare against Ukraine. Because people have been indoctrinated to believe that this is a systematic attack against Russia by the West, by NATO, via Ukraine. And this storyline has been very, very successful. But it is also what we find behind hybrid threats, because these actors are claiming that to be able to defend themselves against the hostile West, they need to use the full range of tools, the full range of instruments against the hostile West. If there are colleagues around who remember the old Soviet times or have read about them, this is the active measures. This is the toolbox that used to be called active measures in the Soviet policy, referring to the full range of tools. And also China talks about the three forms of warfare, and only one form of warfare is a military, and the other forms of warfare are psychological warfare and information war. So they have this doctrine. The revisionist states that war is not just a military activity. War is a political warfare. This is the Russian vocabulary, political warfare, Russia defending itself. China uses the term indirect warfare. So they need to win the battle before the first bullet has been shot. Psychology, information operations, kind of manipulate the enemy. And a defensive battle. So these are the things that we have to understand about the actors' strategies in order to understand what they think they are doing when they are exerting power against democratic societies in the form of hybrid threats. For them, it's the whole toolbox. For them, it is kind of an integrated toolbox where military, information, attacks against critical infrastructures, all forms of hybrid threats are just parts to be used when needed. Now Russia seems to think that an open warfare against the West in Europe is not cost efficient, beneficial for its purposes, so it is using the other parts of its toolbox to weaken us, to undermine the values of our societies. But now I make one point which is important, a part of their strategy, which often goes unnoticed when we talk about hybrid threats, because we tend to think this. I summarize with this. So we tend to think that we are now seeing an unconventional means for power projection, information operations, cyber attacks, attacks against critical infrastructures, acts of sabotage, manipulation of the information space, election interference, that these are now tools, as I said, to weaken us, undermine the democratic values, ensure their continuity of their own authoritarian regimes. And they are using this toolbox instead of the military tools because this is cost efficient for them. We are not prepared. We don't have the protection in place. We did not expect threats to emerge in this form. We did not protect our critical infrastructures, the banking systems, the gas pipelines, because we did not expect them to be under attack. We have protected our borders, our territory, our regimes, but that there are vulnerabilities that are exploited because they are not protected. And that's why these tools, the use of these tools is cost efficient for the threat actors. To increase political pressure and polarization, and we can trust the government to make democracy look bad and kind of hollow out our societies. But what I do not say here is something that you should take note of, because there is also, this is one of the key goals of hybrid threat activities as we see them, but the other is of equal importance and should be taken into account. And if we go back to the old Soviet times again, there was another goal for these types of malign activities, and it was to prepare the battlefield. And with this level of confrontation that we are having in Europe, in the Euro-Atlantic community for the time being, I think we should seriously take into account this role of the hybrid threat tools in preparing the possible battlefield. So to looking for the weak spots of us for a possible high-intensity conflict. Things that can be used in parallel with military activities if needed. And this requires a lot of new thinking from us in terms of protection. Yes. So I have discussed actors. I did not mention, but it should be mentioned, of course, that that it's not only state actors and the revisionist powers that are using these tools against our societies, but these actors are also using a lot of non-state actors as their proxies. How much easier is it to interfere into our societies if one happens to find like-minded internal domestic groups, political groups, terrorist groups, hackers, petty criminals, or just people that to earn a little bit money want to do a small act of sabotage or something harmful to earn money. So this proxy actor, the use of non-state actors should also be taken into account. Hybrid COE has published a lot of work on these, on the forms of non-state actors that state actors are using, in particular Russia and China. We have been mapping non-state actors that have been used and the proxy relationships that there are. Ideological, economic, and so on and so forth. So I think with this I have concluded my assessment on actors, but the tools and tactics. So I would say that even if we need to learn the tools that they are using. We need to be aware, and certainly when we need to protect our societies, we need to be aware of the tools. If it's cyber tools used, if it's manipulation of the information space, disinformation operations, election interference, using critical commodities, access to clean water, energy, instrumentalized migration, these kinds of tools are used by the actors. But it's still much more important for us to understand the tactics, because the tactics is always the same when the threat actors are picking up their tools to go against us. The tactics are always the same: to look at the vulnerabilities and the weak points. Look at those points in our societies that are unprotected. Because if we were protected, and if we kind of knew what to expect, we would also have countermeasures. We would have countermeasures, counter-reactions, and then the costs would not remain limited for the threat actors any longer. So that's why they are attacking. They were attacking gas pipelines, data cables, undersea infrastructures a year or two ago. Now we see a lot of drones being used for attacks. The tool changes, has to change its form, because as soon as we learn to cope with one sort of tool, it's no longer that cost efficient for them. So that's when they need to change the tool. That's why we see new and new tools popping up. And I have not said a word about the new technological environment, but of course that is a field where constantly new tools can be found, for which we are unprepared, for the use of which we are unprepared. A typical characteristic of hybrid threats is not just the tactics of looking for vulnerabilities, but also using a set of tools kind of in parallel. So set of tools, cyber attack and disinformation campaign to mislead public opinion is these days a very seems to be a very useful combination of tools. You do a small cyber attack against a private bank, for instance. You spread around disinformation that this bank is about to collapse due to financial difficulties, so that the customers would see this closing of bank accounts or bank services for a couple of days in a very different light, and they would draw their money back. It would lead to a so-called bank run, and which would certainly lead to a collapse of the bank. But these kinds of things where they do something and then they present it in a very different light, and which leads to activities that are harmful for us, is a very typical combination. A set of tools used in concert to amplify the effects of these tools. And as I already said, these are tools that we characterize as tools in the gray zone. They remain under the threshold of armed attack, because certainly would they reach the threshold of armed attack, we would come with countermeasures. We would have preparedness in place. We would have plans, and we would have cooperation. We would have legislation. That's why these things need to remain under the threshold of armed attack to kind of make both detection and attribution difficult, and to minimize countermeasures. Yes. I won't use much time here, because I try to draw this to a close soon. But so there are plenty of trends of hybrid trends and forms of hybrid threat hybrid threat operations, where we can see the use of tools. We can see different combinations of actors going against Western societies and states. I will read briefly this, so if there is something new for you, you can maybe pick up that what I already said. critical infrastructure in multiple societal domains. Now we come also to the domain of our society, because we see that there are many societal domains, fields of societal activities that are under attack. So critical infrastructure, we are dependent as societies, we are dependent on the critical functions of society. Critical infrastructure covers a broad fields of domains and societies, all from banking sector, financial sector, to infrastructure, energy sector, and this is one of the key targets for hybrid threat activities. The critical infrastructure paralyzing infrastructure, making disturbances, failures, and the kind of causing to destabilize societies, increase distrust in government. Polarization driven by disinformation. How easy it is in the social media platforms to amplify confrontations or kind of focus on topics that are divisive by nature. And if one does that prior to elections, one can maybe affect the outcome of the elections by affecting the topics that are being discussed. If they are very confrontational topics, of course, that leads to an artificial polarization of public opinion and society. Increasing fear and sense of insecurity by various means. Increasing fear, constantly referring to the possibility to use nuclear weapons, constantly referring to the possibility of using military means against our societies. So this war mongering, as it's called, is a typical tool of hybrid threat activity to increase fear among our societies. Weaponizing commodities and dependencies, that's when we might have China in mind. Weaponizing commodities, access to critical raw materials, the supply chain issues, but also weaponizing migration, orchestrating migration, asylum seekers, instrumentalizing migration is ongoing at the Polish border, Lithuanian border, Latvian border, went on for a couple of years also in the north at the Finnish border, and there are southern examples as well. Not normal migration, but instrumentalized and used as a hybrid threat tool. Individuals increasingly targeted, but also used by actors, as I mentioned. Yes. So I will conclude with the following. I was also supposed to talk about response options, but I have to make it brief. I have focused very much on the actors' strategies because I think this is the key, and this is what we should keep in mind when we protect ourselves. We should go back to their goals in order to be able to protect our societies. We have basically two tools, two major tools that we are using, and that we are now states, as well as local communities, as well as international organizations such as the European Union and NATO. We can divide our main tools to counter hybrid threats into two forms. Either we talk about resilience, or we talk about deterrence, and they are two different sorts of tools. Both necessary in countering hybrid threats, protecting our societies, but very different tools. What does resilience mean? Resilience means that we don't that much seek to prevent these malign operations or activities, but we try to make sure that we have an ability to tolerate exceptional circumstances. We as societies have the ability to tolerate to a certain degree exceptional circumstances and ensure a quick return to normal. This is what resilience means. resilience can be achieved by using a variety of tools. We can enhance cyber resilience, we can enhance psychological resilience, economic resilience, different sorts of resilience to enable or allow our societies to tolerate exceptional circumstances. But as I said, the goal here is not that much to prevent. We take that this is we take it for granted that this is an ongoing activity. The actors are powerful, but what we try to make sure is that we minimize costs of these operations for our societies, and that we can live with this kind of a threat environment. And this is where we have plenty of examples. The European Union, for its members, is a very important actor when it comes to enhancing resilience against hybrid threats in many societal domains, and of course NATO as well. We move on. I want to, with this slide, point out a couple of important things that we should have in mind when we try to enhance, if we want to enhance our societal resilience. In this course, you have been also discussing the intelligence as a tool against hybrid threats, and of course, resilience all starts with a good common situational awareness. Now I could go back to the observations I made about the actors. What do they want to achieve? We have to understand their strategies and their goals. We have to understand how they see these tactics, what the tactics for them is, what is the thing they want to achieve in our societies. So this situational awareness, as comprehensive as possible, and also covering the private sector and the civil society actors. This is where any efficient resilience process starts. And we can then ask ourselves, if we have all those processes in place that enable us to understand our awareness, our environment, and kind of make this broad situational awareness possible. We also want to underline openness of societies, making these threats visible, because this is very important for the public. Because if people think that something that's going on in our critical infrastructure is a domestic failure, it's an inefficiency of the government or local authorities, they are acting just as the hybrid threat actors would want them to act. Put the blame on the domestic authorities or the government. So that's why we have to inform the public also, so that people understand that things that can look domestic problems and failures might originate abroad and be intentional policies and strategies of foreign actors. So I think this openness nowadays is better than earlier, but we can certainly still improve it to make these threats visible and the intentions of the hybrid threat actors. They try to lead us to make compromises from our values, from the democratic values. So that's why we have to make sure that we are sticking to those values as much as possible. We don't start making compromises for our rule of law system. We have to have high levels of non-corruption to block avenues for hostile actors. So this has to be kept in mind. And to protect the critical services of our society, such as the free media, quality journalism, to prevent or to be resilient against disinformation. And my final slide will deal with deterrence, which we can certainly then discuss if you are interested. Deterrence has a different type of goal. When I said that resilience policies do not seek change the policies of the threat actors. But this is exactly what we try to achieve with efficient policy of deterrence. To deter means to impose a cost on a malign activity so that it would no longer be cost efficient for the threat actors to go on with their malign operations. Make it less cost efficient tool for them. And here our greatest difficulty is my second bullet point, if someone can see it. We tend to define the cost on this based on our own cost calculus and our own values. Human lives matter for us, but we can ask ourselves whether human lives matter to the threat actors. So to impose a real cost on their malign activities, we would need to go back to their value system to understand what is valuable for them and to punish that, to impose a cost that would also be a real cost for the threat actors and not only in our eyes. Of course, we do have a lot of deterring policies, sanctions, naming and shaming, diplomatic measures, strategic communication. We have established a lot of deterrence policies, but to get deterrence right requires a number of things that are quite challenging for us to make sure that these instruments have an effect and we can change the big picture. And there will be other presentations later on discussing these things. And my final point deals with the efficiency of deterrence, which is of course greater at the EU-NATO level. Just a checklist for us when we want to protect our societies, create a response. We have to identify our own vulnerabilities to prevent them from being exploited by threat actors, enhance our preparedness also for these threats, share best practices among societies, but also among local communities. Best practices, what is an efficient policy in support of our resilience? And the word that I have not mentioned this far, but I should mention 10 times at the end of my presentation, which is practice and train. Companies should practice, NGOs should practice, universities should practice, and governmental actors should practice to counter hybrid threats and protect themselves. So train and practice is what the threat actors would not like us doing, so, and we should enhance our capabilities to meet this threat by training and practicing. I thank you so much for your attention. I'm ready for your questions and comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions?
No, antes. Vale. Que me parece siempre bastante extraño tener que hablar en inglés estando en la octava maravilla del mundo, San Lorenzo del Escorial. But it is what it is, so I'm going to speak my native language from the American perspective. I would like to say the situation that we're facing right now with the Russian bear. Russian understand only one language, action, respects only one word, force. So I would like to have Professor real perspective from the challenge on the European that haven't understand really the situation that you're facing right now in Russia, especially only the United States have had always the guts to put on the situation, especially in Ukraine, and trying to have the best disposition of strength that constitutes the conduct of an entire campaign. So the great power competition is really, as you were saying, Professor, is back with vengeance. With vengeance, Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, all the situation. Are we really understanding that the intelligence that we have to face and to support the military effort through this thing? Because as we say, thank you always Professor Gustavo Díaz-Matei for his intellectual leadership in the Spanish School of Intelligence Studies. Finally, what is really intelligence? The correct definition of intelligence. When we say that intelligence is the process by which specific type of information are requested, collected, and analyzed by policy policymaker to really make a difference in the outcome of the war? Are we going to win this
Luigi,
final outcome
Luigi,
with Russia?
The
Thank you.
question. What is the question?
The Russia,
Make
the
it
situation
short.
that the European intelligence is really capable to have an independence through the American perspective on the Russian bear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a very good question and very difficult question for me to answer. If we have the sufficient intelligence capabilities to kind of track and monitor the Russian thinking or planning, or we have at the hybrid COE many times we've been asked many times that does Russia really have a strategy, or is it just using the opportunities? So is it strategic or is it opportunistic? And of course, the more it is opportunistic, the more challenges I think I see with any intelligence actor to foresee what might be coming. If you get my point, it's easier to track an actor that is kind of that has created a strategy and that is following in its strategy than an actor that is just kind of seizing the opportunities emerging. And this might also, if we go to the core of your question, these military activities and military confrontations. If we think about our need to understand when would Russia take the step, so cross the border and start testing more seriously the use of military tools against a NATO country, for instance. This far, it's just kind of a little bit testing, but and that would be hugely important for us to understand the logic. So, but if it's just using the opportunity when it emerges, can any intelligence service then be kind of in a position to send a warning in advance? I throw this back to you, but I think I am not capable of assessing the capabilities of the fully European services and what would how well we can act independently and without the support of the US here. But yeah, but I to my presentation I add also this point when I so much underlined the strategies of the threat actors, that I think China is more strategic. It has a clear plan. Russia has also its plan, but its roadmap to this to achieve this plan might look a bit different, and it's this opportunism is an important characteristic.
Thank you for the lecture. Quick question. I wanted to ask, which do you think is the role in private risk companies and risk intelligence, for example, in deterring hybrid threats?
I think all in all, the intelligence machinery that we can put together might be very useful. Maybe the coordination is what what comes to my mind as a challenge. We are seeing a lot of attacks and operations against privately owned resources as well. Critical infrastructures, to a large extent, in many countries are privately owned. Private companies need to understand the risks. I don't know if you refer to by kind of private risk assessment companies. I'm not that well aware of the relationship of that work to governmental bodies. So what private, how the kind of the overall intel activities can be then brought together, but the conclusion from our work at Hybrid COE has been that the hybrid threat activities have proven to be very successful operations against our societies to a large extent due to our weak preparedness. And however we can strengthen this preparedness with whatever types of Intel activities, if we can successfully enhance our preparedness for the use of hybrid threat tools. If we think about the broad cyber field, if we think about interconnectedness of different systems and facilities in the internet, for instance. So there are so many things to protect, and where preparedness for threat activities needs to be enhanced. So I would welcome all actors to the field, but then when it comes to, of course, governmental policies, the question of coordinating Intel activities and making sure that we have a shared situational awareness, that might be the challenge.
Any more questions? Last one? No? Thank you. Okay, hello again. I don't know if I'm gonna say the name correctly. Bifadea?
Yes.
Ah,
Perfect. Thank you.
very good. Christian is he coordinated the efforts of transformation in your country, in the intelligence services of your country. I'm correct?
In one of them, because
One of them?
we have many.
You have many. Here we only have one.
I know, and that's an advantage. Trust me.
Yeah, and he's also a sociologist. He holds a PhD on sociology, with a PhD related with Great Maghreb, democratic and political perspective. Very good. And he's a university professor, and he's really an expert relating hybrid threats, and he's gonna tell us related the intelligence services and how to counter in hybrid threats in these difficult moments. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a very flattering introduction. Put it shortly, I was basically the deputy director of the Romanian Intelligence Service. Don't let the name fool you, because as I said, we have a few services in Romania, and the Romanian Intelligence Service is not the one doing the spying thing. It's the one doing the counterintelligence thing. So we are the internal, at least I was, belonging to the internal service of Romania. Mind you that service is, as far as we know, one of the biggest security services in Europe, in European Union, in terms of number of personnel. And there is a historical reason for that, and I feel compelled to tell you about it before I start the presentation. In the early 90s, when we established the new Romanian after the Romanian Revolution, we faced a big question. And the question was about security. And we faced a big threat. As always, even during communism, the biggest threat for us was always Russia. And the security threat has two dimensions: the military part of it, and if you like, the civilian, the peacetime part of it. And basically, the leaders of Romania back then in the early 90s thought that we could never, ever be a match for Russia in the military field. And I think that was a reasonable conclusion. But they said that at least we can have a chance in the security field. That's why they invested a lot to the standards of those days and to the standards of Romania in those days in the security field. That's why today we still have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, security service in Europe. So I belong to that service. When I retired 2 years ago, I was the deputy director of that service, and I gave that context to understand from which experience I'm drawing the conclusion that I'm about to make. Before going further, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for having me here today. And I have two confessions to make. First, obviously, English is not my native tongue, and I'm guessing that is not yours as well. So I've taken the liberty of writing my ideas in advance just to make sure that I will find the proper words to convey them. Second, I'm not here to discover the theory of hybrid threats in front of you. My predecessor did that brilliantly, so I'm happy that I took another path. This is not my goal, and this is not why the good people of Complutense University paid for my travel and my accommodation. Many thanks for that, by the way. I am here as someone who has watched the hybrid threats evolve for more than 2 decades from inside the European Security and Intelligence Service in a region that served, more or less, willing or unwillingly, for decades as a test ground for many of the methods we now label as being hybrid. I've seen propaganda before algorithms. I've seen economic pressure before we can call it coercion. I have seen political subversion before the term hybrid warfare appeared in glossy reports or in nice presentations. So when I speak about hybrid threats today, I do not speak as if they were a sudden meteor hitting the West out of nowhere some years ago. I speak of them as the latest vocabulary for an older struggle, updated by technologies, yes, accelerated by interdependencies, yes, and complicated, I want to be frank with you, by our own institutional habits and shortcomings. But I want to begin with something more fundamental than the threats themselves. I want to begin with a question about identity, specifically my own personal, professional identity. When I'm introduced at the conferences, and I have been introduced at a few so far, the formulation is almost invariably the same. We are pleased to welcome a security expert. I'm happy that that didn't happen today, but it was in the writing, so I build on that a little bit. Because I've spent 25 years gently resisting this label. Not out of false modesty, mind you, but because I believe the label is somehow wrong, and that is, this wrongness carries significant analytical and operational consequences later on if you and I take this label seriously. I'm not an expert in security. As a former counter-espionage and counterintelligence officer and deputy director of a security service, what I am is something totally different. I am rather an expert in insecurity. And this distinction is not rhetorical, although some of you smiled a little bit when I said it. An expert in security operates from the premise that order is the natural state and the threats are anomalies to be neutralized. An expert in insecurity, on the other hand, begins from the opposite premise. Vulnerability is the default condition of any complex system, social, institutional, informational, or technological. And security is always a temporary, contingent, and partially illusory achievement. Therefore, I'm an expert in insecurity. And although my former service is a security service, what we dealt with was not security, was insecurity. If we didn't have insecurity, I didn't have a job. This inventory is the intellectual foundation from which I approach hybrid threats today, because the concept itself emerged not from a moment of strategic clarity, but from a moment of acute institutional disorientation. From the recognition by Western intelligence services, and not only, also by Western politicians, Western academia, and so on, that they were operating with a map that no longer matched the terrain. Today I want to examine this map together with you, and its inequities, if you like, from three different angles. The first is the security angle. Old threats, new dynamics. The second is the political angle, the scapegoat terminology. And the third is the strategic angle that was touched in great length by my predecessor, the catch-all geopolitical phrasing. Each reveals, and revealed for me during my activity in the service, something different. And each, I believe, reveals something uncomfortable for all of us. Let's take the first angle, the security dimension, what I refer as old threats and new dynamic. What hybrid threats actually are at the operational level before the political and strategical layers are added. At first glance, the catalog is impressive. We have disputes around undersea cables, drones incursions, cyber attacks on hospitals and energy pipelines, information manipulation campaigns, lawfare, economic coercion, instrumentalized migration, and the broad gray of covert operation, proxies, and deniable actions with sabotage thrown into the mix. But if you strip the jargon away and you take the technology aside, you'll find that most of these elements are all acquaintances of any serious intelligence professional. Propaganda is not new, active measures are not new, economic leverage is not new, proxy forces are not new, political infiltration are not new, covert signaling below the threshold of formal war is not new. And we know that these are not new, not only because we dealt with them in the future, but because we employ them from time to time against our adversary. So keep in mind that we are not only confronted with a hybrid threat, we are also generating hybrid threats for our adversaries from time to time, if we are to be honest with each other. What has changed is therefore not the inventory. What has changed is the dynamic, the way these instruments interact, the speed at which they operate, and the environment in which they are deployed. It is this dynamic, not the individual tools, that creates the genuine intelligence challenge today. And on this I will build somehow on what Teja, the director of COI Hybrid, said earlier. Mind you that my speaking notes obviously predate her presentation, and we can vouch together that we did not exchange our ideas beforehand. But I am well familiarized with the great work that you are doing over the years since the center inception. So there was no intelligence behind our overlapping. So the first feature, the feature that I want to draw your attention, is something that I called and still call it simultaneity. We are no longer dealing with one type of pressure at a time, following a logical sequence that intelligence services can track and anticipate, as they did before. What we now observe is economic pressure combined with disinformation combined with cyber probing, cyber incidents combined with legal maneuvers combined with symbolic military escalation at the border. All threats, previously deployed sequentially, are now orchestrated in synchronicity, simultaneously. For a security architecture built on linear analytical logic, as ours was, and in some respects still is, basically one that identified the threat, classified it, routed to the competent directorate, generated a response, simultaneity is structurally destabilizing. It forces the system to monitor multiple domains concurrently, to interpret cross-domain signals that arrive without a label, and to make decisions under conditions where no single incident appears decisive, but the aggregate pattern that emerges is unmistakable. This is a problem not of collection, to respond to a question that was previously made, but of integration. The signals are present, the signals are there. The analytical failure, when it occurs, is the failure to recognize that signals from different domains belonging to a single campaign. The operational failure is not to to act because you don't have, I will put it another way. The operational failure is the impossibility to act because you don't have an updated doctrine of your own, a strategy that fits, and basically a hybrid organization to respond to hybrid threats. And this is a question mark that I will leave with you, maybe for future engagement. Why don't we have, why don't we build, why didn't we transform our previous organization, our previous administration better and faster? Why didn't we build more hybrid institutions since we are facing hybrid threats for a decade now? So the second feature that I want to draw your attention on is synchronization. Synchronization is about timing. It's about orchestration. And it's analytical, more sophisticated, and operational, even more challenging. In mature hybrid campaigns, the instruments are not merely deployed at the same time. They are also calibrated to reinforce each other. A cyber incident prepares the information terrain for a future political crisis. An economic dispute provides the context, if you like, for legal maneuvers that otherwise appear disproportionate. A small kinetic incident at the border becomes an anchor for a massive information storm that dominates the news cycle and shapes the political response space. The security challenge, therefore, is not merely a larger inventory of threats. It is a better composed threat, all tool arranged, as I have said to colleagues over time, like instruments in a score. Each is recognizable in isolation. Together they produce a music that is considerably more complex and more disturbing than any single note before. Here I want to introduce the distinction that I consider essential: the difference between a hybrid incident and a hybrid campaign. A hybrid incident is a discrete, even singular event: a cyber attack, a disinformation narrative, an act of economic coercion. A hybrid campaign is an orchestrated combination of such incidents in ways that could achieve a defined strategic objective. The intelligence error, therefore, is to analyze incidents as if they are events rather than as nodes in a network of intentional action. Which leads me to the third feature of this new dynamic, which is acceleration, made possible by digital infrastructure and compounded by deep interdependence of modern systems. A rumor that would have taken weeks to spread in the past through analogical channels now reaches millions of people within hours. A financial disruption that would previously have remained contained somewhere ripples through interconnected markets in minutes. A cyber attack on a single node in a tightly coupled infrastructure network produces cascading failures that its designers may not have fully anticipated when they build the network, and that its victims, with certainty, not have fully prepared for. All threats under this condition do not merely travel faster. They behave completely differently. The speed of propagation changes the responses calculuses. By the time an intelligence assessment, and this is something that I know for a fact, reaches the political level, the narrative environment in which it has been received has already been shaped by adversary informational operation. So it's not that our analysis is not fast. It's not that the decision is not accurate. The speed to which we are reaching a conclusion and afterwards build an action against it is just too slow. By the time we do it, our adversary moves to another thing already. Attribution, therefore, technically achievable nowadays, even more so than in the past, arrives in a political landscape where it can no longer perform its intended function. Basically, our adversary, they do not need to defeat our intelligence collection. They need only to ensure that our assessment arrives too late to shape the decision in a proper way. What are the consequences for the intelligence practice? What does this new dynamic require from a Western intelligence service in concrete operational terms? It requires, in my view, a fundamental reorientation of the analytical question. Instead of asking, what is this single event, we must ask ourselves, what cluster is this event part of? Instead of asking which agency owns the problem, and luckily for you in Spain, you don't have this question because you have only one service, but there are other bodies also in Spain that are responsible with the response, we must ask ourselves what other system does this action touch, directly or indirectly. Instead of asking, how do we fix this incident, we must ask, what pattern does it belong to? And what will the next element of that pattern look like? This is, I want to warn you, is not an abstract methodological preference from an old counterintelligence guy. This is an operational necessity. Intelligence services that analyze hybrid campaign as a series of discrete incidents will always be behind, and I also know this for a fact. Our adversary advantage is not superior resources or superior creativity. It's the systematic exploitation of the gap between our incident level response and their campaign level planning. Closing this gap is our first challenge. And it is, I want to be precise, precisely an organizational and cultural challenge before it is a technological one. Better algorithms do not compensate for an analytical framework that remains stuck in single domain logic, or for slow-moving intelligent feeds to our political masters. Now I want to advance a claim that will be uncomfortable for some in the audience, and which I believe is nonetheless or even more so necessary. The concept of hybrid threats has become, in significant measures, a political scapegoat. By scapegoat, I mean this precisely. The term is deployed by our political actors to externalize responsibility for domestic vulnerabilities, to attribute to adversarial design what is, at least partially, the consequence of our own political and administrative failures. And when this happens, the intelligence services caught in the middle face a structural dilemma for which there is no comfortable exit. And I know this also for a fact. Let me be clear, as I was in the opening, about what I am not arguing. I am not arguing that hybrid threats are not real. They are. I am not arguing that adversarial states do not deliberately exploit our vulnerabilities. They do, systematically and with considerable sophistication. What I am arguing is that the political appropriation of the hybrid threat concept has introduced a systemic bias into the threat assessment that serves neither analytical integrity, operational success, nor strategic coherence. Basically, for internal political reason, we are abusing this terminology. And we have, if you like, an externalization dynamic. The mechanism operates as follows. A Western democracy experienced significant domestic political disruption. A polarizing election result, a surge in extremist party support, a breakdown in institutional trust, a viral disinformation campaign that finds traction in a receptive social environment. The political establishment, seeking to account for this disruption without interrogating its own failure, reaches for the hybrid threat framework immediately. Foreign interference becomes, therefore, the master explanatory variable, if you like, of our own political system. The disinformation campaign is attributed to external actors, and it might well contain elements that are externally amplified. It is stupid for their part not to do so. But the underlying social division, the institutional credibility deficit, the media ecosystem vulnerabilities, all this existed prior to any adversarial intervention. They would have produced political turbulence even in the absence of any hybrid threat. The adversary did not create the wound. They just solved it. It stings more, yes, but does not in reality hurt you more. The hybrid threat label allows political actors to perform two functions simultaneously. First, they claim the authority that comes with framing a domestic political problem as a national security issue, triggering all the legal and institutional frameworks associated with security response. Second, they deflect accountability for the condition that made the intervention effective in the first place. The intelligence services in this dynamic are placed again in an impossible position. They are asked to provide the initial foundation for a political claim that, if accepted uncritically, will distort their own analytical process going forward. If every domestic political disruption becomes evidence of hybrid warfare, then the category in itself loses its discriminating power entirely. When everything is a hybrid threat, nothing is a hybrid threat. This terminological inflation of a concept is always the first sign of an analytic exhaustion. And I think we are facing that nowadays throughout Europe and beyond. And this is the biggest doctrinal challenge, in my view, when talking about hybrid threats today. This creates what I will describe as the intelligence community fundamental political dilemma in the hybrid threat environment. And it operates as a double bind. On one side of the bind, we have under-attribution. If intelligence services apply rigorous evidentiary standards to hybrid threat attribution, standards appropriate from a domain where adversary deliberately construct ambiguity, if you will, they will find themselves time and time again unable to make the definitive attribution that political actors need to justify response. They will be accused of analytical timidity, institutional conservatism, or failing to connect the dots, and worst, of operational inefficiency. On the other side, we have the political capture. If intelligence services lower their evidentiary standards to accommodate political demands for clear, usable attribution, or if their analysis altogether is systematically selected, emphasized, or reframed by political actors to serve political narratives, and mind you, that is both true at the national level or at the international level in EU, as I'm pretty sure my all-time friend sitting here in front of me knows this already. Intelligence analysis is deformed by political demand. And I have a couple of examples for you, but I will only use one right now. The assessment prior to 2014 of Ukraine represents an opposite failure, one in which we have institutional conservatism in face of genuinely new and novel hybrid action that did not fit existing analytical templates and for which we didn't have any precedent. And I also know this for a fact because that was, I will put it another way. I was among many that did not believe that the Russian will attack, and that was one of the biggest intelligence blunders of my career. Now, let's try to build together a typology of the scapegoat function, drawing basically on patterns that have been publicly documented and analytically significant across Europe's democratic context in the past decade. Type 1, electoral interference attribution. Following major election in which establishment candidates performed below expectation, a now recognizable pattern has emerged. Initial hybrid interference attribution is made through political channels before any intelligence assessment is complete. Intelligence services are then pressured to confirm, qualify, or refute the attribution. The resulting political ambiguity serves neither security clarity nor political legitimacy later on. The analytical sequence has been inverted. The conclusion precedes the analysis. And I will not name and blame because I believe it's unnecessary, since I'm sure that all of you could point out some very well-known examples. Type 2, disinformation as hybrid weapon. The framing of domestic disinformation as hybrid weapon is analytically defensible when external actors are primary originators of the content and you can demonstrate that they coordinate its amplification. It becomes scapegoating when domestic political movement, including populist formation with entirely indigenous origins, are labeled proxies of foreign hybrid operation primarily because their rhetoric aligns with our versional narratives. Alignment is not causation. Intelligence analysis requires this distinction. Political discourse frequently elides it. with consequences that are damaging both our analytical credibility and the democratic legitimacy, as I said earlier. Type 3, infrastructure vulnerability attribution. When a significant infrastructure failure occurs, the immediate political reflex has increasingly been hybrid attribution, frequently in advance of any forensic assessment. This reflex serves institutional self-protection for the agency responsible for infrastructure security, but it systematically redirects public attention from the structural underinvestment or organizational failure that produced the vulnerability in the first place. The corrective I promoted when I was still in the service, and I have to propose to you today, is not the abandonment, is not to put aside the hybrid threat concept. It is what I would call analytical hygiene, the institutional discipline of maintaining explicit, documented separation between what the intelligence assessments say and what the political narrative requires it to say. There is a big distinction between the two of them. In practice, this means insisting on definitional precision, even when precision is politically inconvenient, even when it takes time, even when, and more so, when it's against the tide. Because a hybrid threat is not any discomfort. It is coordinated hostile activity deliberately designed to produce strategic effect across domains. A hybrid campaign is not every crisis. It is a pattern of deliberate action by hostile actor intended to operate below formal conflict threshold. A hybrid incident is not any attack. It is an event whose meaning lies in its role inside a larger orchestrated campaign. Without this distinction, as I pointed out earlier, the concept cannot do analytical work it is supposed to do it. This may seem like pedantry, I give you that, but it is not. The precision of terminology is the precision of thought. The precision of thought allows for accurate action. And therefore, that precision of thought is what separates intelligence from noise, which is, at its core, what our adversary want to produce. They want to produce noise. Let's not allow them, let's not let them to exploit our own shortcomings in doing so. Let's not add to the noise ourselves. We are now at the third, and luckily for you, the last, and in some respect, the most fundamental challenge that hybrid threats generates for our Western intelligence services. The concept of hybrid threat that was developed in Western strategic discourse, as you mentioned earlier, over the past decade, it seems to me at least, that has become a catch-all geopolitical phrasing, a terminology container that is sufficiently elastic to accommodate almost any adversarial behavior. And precisely because of this elasticity, precisely because of this container that can fit all, increasingly, I believe that the terminology in itself is increasingly incapable of generating specific strategic prediction or prescribing specific strategic responses. A concept that explains everything explains nothing at all. And the strategic framework that cannot generate specific prediction cannot be used to design specific responses. This is the core problem in my view. Not the descriptive ambition of the concept, which is legitimate, but its predictive impotence, which is strategically dangerous. To understand this, and to understand how we arrive here, we need to trace the genealogy of the concept in Western strategic document. But I won't do that because we can do that as well. Starting with the NATO first systematic engagement with hybrid warfare as a strategic concept, and what that was, if I'm not wrong, in the wake of 2006 Lebanon war. Then the EU moved forward and so on. What I'm trying to say, and please check it out for yourself, is that strategic concepts that expand to encompass everything lose their capacity to prioritize anything. And prioritization is a fundamental function of strategy. This problem of prioritization and the strategic dimension provide most operational damaging consequences for intelligence services today. Intelligence services operate under permanent resource constraint. No Western intelligence agency has the collection and analytical capacity to monitor all potential hybrid threat vectors simultaneously at the level of sensitivity required for actionable intelligence. Not even my former service, with all the talented many people that are working there. Nobody, regardless of how many resources they have, can do everything today. Therefore, prioritization is not a management preference. It is a structural necessity. And prioritization requires strategic concepts specific enough to generate discriminating criteria. The threat vector matters more than before because it is more likely to produce the adversarial effect at the decision point. When hybrid threat concept is elastic enough to encompass everything from military provocation to university research partnership, mind you, why not? Prioritization becomes structurally impossible. We have basically three dysfunctional institutional strategies. The first is threat inflation. Everything is assessed as potential hybrid threat vector. The second is threat deflation. Faced with an impossible broad mandate, analysts default to the collection and the analytical methodology they have always used, the one for which their institution were originally designed, and label the output hybrid threats analysis in retrospect, regardless of whether it addressed the generally novel elements of hybrid campaign. The third is institution fragmentation. Different directorates claim ownership for hybrid threat vectors, generating separate analytical products that are never integrated in coherent campaign-level picture. The cyber directorate, the counterintelligence directorate, the foreign influence unit, the economic intelligence unit, each produce excellent single domain analysis. Together, they systematically fail to detect the cross-domain integration that is defining signature of any mature hybrid campaign. Truth of the matter is that we are living in a hybrid threat security environment for many years now, or we claim to do so, but we do not have, as I said in the beginning, enough at least, if any, hybrid institution designed for the appropriate response. And that is also true for most of our intelligence services that were in themselves designed so many years ago for such a different reality. Beyond prioritization, the catch-all character of hybrid threat concept has created what I will call the attribution response gap. And I underline this because I believe this, for the future, this might be the most useful idea of my long presentation today. This is my humble assessment, the single most consequential strategic dysfunction of the current framework. Western strategic doctrine has developed a significant and growing capacity for attribution, identifying the actor, characterizing the instrument, assessing the strategic objective being pursued. What it has not developed in anything approaching the same proportion is the response framework specifically calibrated to the hybrid character of the threat. Conventional military doctrines operate to the coherent response logic. Threat is identified, response options are generated, escalation dynamics are assessed, political decision is made, response is implemented, and afterwards effects are measured. This logic is built on the idea that a threat is sufficiently unambiguous to trigger the institutional response machinery. Hybrid threats by design do not meet this triggering threshold, and Western strategic doctrine has not developed an effective response framework for the space below it. What we have instead is a proliferation of analytical and communication mechanisms, hybrid centers of excellence, some top of the line, like the one in Helsinki, by the way, strategic communication task forces, influence operations working group. All of them are well resourced for analysis and poorly equipped for operational responses. Our adversary, they have understood this asymmetry precisely. Hybrid campaigns are calibrated not merely to exploit the seams between Western bureaucratic structure, but to exploit the gap between what Western intelligence services can identify and what Western political system can authorize in response. Attribution without response is, from the adversary perspective, confirmation that the operation has achieved its primary objective, to demonstrate that the target can see what is happening and cannot stop it. They don't want to hide it anymore. On the contrary, they want us to recognize that they can hurt us and we can do basically nothing about it. This is the underlying idea. Just hurting us is not enough. Just recognize what they are doing is not enough. Recognizing that they can hurt us and we can do nothing about it, this is the end goal of any hybrid campaign today. What is the corrective then? I want to propose to you 3 principles, 3 being unintentionally, I assure you, the magic number of my presentation, that I believe should guide the recalibration of a hybrid threat concept at the strategic level. Not as policy prescription, but as analytical framework for the kind of scholarly work that institutions like this one are uniquely positioned to produce. The first principle is vector specificity. Rather than maintaining a single elastic concept, Western intelligence and strategic communities should invest in disaggregating hybrid threats into specific threat vectors, each with its own collection methodology, analytical framework, attribution standard, and response repertoire. Influence operations, cyber coercion, proxy military action, and economic weaponization are different phenomena with different operational logistics, with different operational logic, different attribution requirement, and different response option. Treating them as instances in a single category generates analytic confusion that serves our adversary. The second principle is campaign orientation. The integrating analytical concepts should not be hybrid threats in the abstract, but hybrid campaign in the specific. The reorientation of intelligence analysis from taxonomy to detection. Not it is a hybrid threat, but it is action. It is this action part of the campaign. What is the objective, and what will the next element look like? And the third and final principle is response pre-authorization. The attribution response gap cannot be closed by improving attribution alone. Though that remains necessary, I'll give you that. It requires political investment in pre-authorizing specific responses below the conventional military threshold, like reciprocal cyber operation, targeted economic countermeasures, accelerated information counter campaigns, accelerated legal and regulatory responses. This is institutionally difficult in our Western democracies, which have accountability mechanisms designed for a slower, more deliberate decision environment. It is strategically necessary, in my view, for an adversary who has calibrated their campaign timeline to exploit exactly that institutional and our institutional slowness. We are basically too slow to reach an effective response. Let me now bring the triangles together. I don't know how we are time-wise. Not as a summary, but as a convergence. From the security angle, we established that hybrid threats are all threats in a new dynamic. From the political angle, we identified the systematic risk of conceptual capture, how a term originally designed for analytical precision can become an instrument of political externalization, creating a structural dilemma for intelligence services caught between analytical rigor and political utility. The institutional challenge is therefore primarily one of independence, not of capability. We should re-establish our independence once more. From the strategic angles, we trace the consequences of terminological inflation, how a concept that expands to describe everything loses its capacity to prioritize anything. The strategic challenge is primarily one of specificity, not ambition. For any intelligence service in the West, these triangles converge into one central operating and operational reality. We are asked to perform with greater precision in a security environment that is more complex, with political language that is more elastic, and with a strategic discourse that is more abstract. Our function or I would say your function, because I no longer belong to a security service, is to reduce confusion, not to join it, not to amplify it. I began this lecture by proposing that I'm not an expert in security, but an expert in insecurity. Allow me to explain in closing what that distinction finally means. An expert in security will close a lecture on hybrid threats by proposing solutions. Better coordination mechanism, improve intelligence sharing, more robust deterrence framework. I heard them all time and time again in different places, in different frameworks, together with some of the people in the audience. I won't say that they don't work. I will say that they have limits through which they are effective. All of these are important. I do not dismiss them, but they all are built on the idea that the primary problem is operational. The better machinery for doing what we already know how to do will resolve the challenge. An expert in insecurity reaches a different conclusion. The primary problem is not operational. It is conceptual. The framework itself, as it has been developed through its security, political, and strategic dimension, contains pathologies that better operational machinery, if you like, will not resolve, but later on amplify. What is required is the willingness to question whether hybrid threats are currently deployed is still a useful analytical category, or whether it has outlived its indiscriminate utility and needs to be rebuilt on more specific, more trackable, more operational, actionable foundation. The greatest threat, in my view, to a Western intelligence service operating in the hybrid environment is not the sophistication of its adversaries, formidable as they are or not. It is the institutional comfort of our own conceptual framework. And basically, to be true to ourselves, the institutional comfort in our own institutional architecture. As my brilliant former advisor Gabriel, some of you know him and remember, would say, "Sir, what we have here is a design problem." I close with a question that I believe should animate the research agenda of wonderful places like your own, and to stimulate great minds like the ones we have in the audience today. If hybrid threat as a concept has served primarily to reveal the inadequacies of the existing frameworks, if it has been more diagnostic than prescriptive, more descriptive than predictive, what is the concept that should succeed it? What is the analytical framework that is specific enough to generate actionable intelligence, robust enough to resist political capture, and flexible enough to accommodate the genuine novelty of 21st century adversarial behavior? I do not have the answer, and even if I do, it's no longer my place to prescribe. After all, I am retired. But I am confident it will not come from the intelligence practitioners alone, though we are a necessary part of this conversation. It will come from the kind of rigorous, uncomfortable, institutionally inconvenient scholarship that universities, at their best, are uniquely positioned to generate, and also services like CNI, smart enough to accommodate. This is why I came here, and that perhaps is the most important thing an expert in insecurity can tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting lecture.
And very long one.
No. You stick very strict to the time. Before opening to the questions to the floor, if you don't mind, I got a question because it is very interesting lecture. One of the main things related with the intelligence services and the European institution, and in general, the institution facing hybrid threats, strategies, one of the main things is countering the threats together, working together. And my question is very simple. I don't know if we have the answer here. Do you think it's a common perception of threats within the societies of the European Union? Because in the institutions of the European Union, even in NATO, are a clear understanding that we are facing a different way of threats, different tools, as the other speaker proposals here. But do you think in Europe, the different societies in Europe, they have a clear understanding and a common understanding of the threats?
This is a question that has so many layers into it. And I want to thank you for that, because it allows me to pick and choose what I want to answer from it. What I can tell you a number of things without disclosing anything that I shouldn't. First of all, there is, at the level of the intelligence and security services in Europe and beyond, if we are thinking about the NATO framework, for instance, there is a much better common understanding, and definitely a much better common action that it's publicly perceived. And it's normal to be like that, because all the intelligence and security services operate under secrecy. But I can assure all of you, being free from my former position, that the security and intelligence services have a better understanding and the better cooperation and the better communication than anybody outside them can perceive. Not even their political masters, mind you. And this is also a good thing, because that means that they trust us, that they trust you. So this is the thing that you cannot see. What you can see, what everybody can see, based on the vivid conversation that everybody's having at NATO level, at EU level, more to the point, is that it's not necessarily unclarity, but there are different perceptions about threat levels and about prioritization, precisely the thing that I tried to underline in my presentation. Many years ago, when talking with a lot of my friends, including friends from Spain, about where our investment, where our attention should be in the NATO framework, for instance. Of course, we have different views based on our own different national interest and national agenda and national threats. There is no secret that for Spain, southern flank is more important than the eastern flank, and it's natural to be so. Again, for Romania, eastern flank is more important than southern flank. Southern flank matters for us a lot in the summertime when we go into vacation. But throughout the years, we are concerned about the eastern flank. And I explained many years ago to some of my colleagues, if I'm not mistaken, one of them is still in the audience today, that we understand this. For instance, the perception about Russia, we always perceive Russia as a fire. And depends on the distance from to which you are to the fire, you have a different feeling. And it's not only a perception. You have a different reaction. Us being close to the fire, we get burned from time to time, and it's painful. If you get further from the fire, let's take Germany for instance, you get warm and cozy. Russia is not that bad, was not that bad, and so on and so forth. Mind you, this is an old conversation, it's not a current conversation. If you are further away from the fire, you just see a little light lingering in the somewhere over there that reminds you that Russia is still a thing. And if you are on beyond the horizon, you only see the smoke, if any. So what we have different in the public political conversation about threats is the threat perception. Russia is the same for all of us, but does not affect us the same. China is the same for all of us, but does not affect us the same, and so on and so forth. So I do believe that we have a common understanding, but we have different priorities. How we can level these priorities in order for something that burn us in the eastern flank, warm you on the southern flank, or vice versa, burns you on the southern flank and warm us on the eastern flank in the summertime, is something that is still yet in the making, I would say. I don't see a way in which we can come to a common understanding, and I don't think we need to. What we need to have, though, it's a common response when need be. And that's a different story altogether. So I've taken the liberty to respond to some of the layers in your question. If there is one thing more precisely that you would like me to address, I will be more than happy to do so.
Fantastic answer. Any more questions over there?
Yeah, I think it works now. First of all, thank you for the lecture. It was very enlightening and very interesting and a lot of points. So I'll just stick to one, which is you mentioned at the beginning of the lecture something to do with the political scapegoating and how maybe, as you mentioned, political masters will use hybrid threats or hybrid strategies as a scapegoat to avoid accountability. How do we draw the line between what is legitimate democratic differences of opinion versus a hybrid strategy, and what should the services do and how should they confront those differences? Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I cannot help myself. In my last job, I was in charge, among other things, with analysis in my service. And in analysis, you need to have precision. That's why precision was something that I mentioned time and time again in my presentation today. When we say we, which precisely are we talking about? We, the Spanish people, we, the Spanish government, which belongs to the Spanish people, we, the Spanish service, we, the Spanish media, with the Spanish political parties, we who? Because this definition, although it's common for all of us, might be read in a different way by every single one of us. Therefore, I don't have the answer, because the answer belongs to we the Spanish people, with the Spanish government, with the Spanish media, with the Spanish security and intelligence service. The same way it belongs to we, the Romanian people, and so on and so forth. I don't have the answer because this is an answer that in democracies we constantly renegotiate. There is not only because we are changing the ingredients in the mix, but because we are changing the proportion of it. For instance, if you are, for instance, in a state of emergency, lawful state of emergency, some of the rights will be decreased. But we are all in agreement with that. Also, it changed because of the context. We have had a different conversation in the age of analogical media than the conversation that we have today in the age of digital media. There is a different conversation altogether. But the we part is the most important part, because the responsibility belongs to us to renegotiate this. What I would like to draw your attention, and I try to do that in my very condensed presentation, is that we need to be very clear about the result of that renegotiation, or even about the fact that a renegotiation is in process. Because sometimes, and this is the biggest danger, we are not aware that a renegotiation is in process, structurally speaking, legally speaking, politically speaking, intelligence-wise, and so on. And more to the point, we are not aware of the result of that renegotiation. That's why some of us still believe that they live in an old reality. Some of us believe that they live in a new reality. Some of us even believe that they live in a future reality. So we need to renegotiate that. I know it sounds philosophical, but the question was philosophical. So please remind me the second part of your question, because it has something to do with the services. And I hope on that I could be more precise.
Yeah, it was about how the services could confront different political scapegoating, or what they should do when faced with that situation.
It's very simple. at my, although I have a PhD in sociology, I'm a law graduate. So I still remember the first lesson with an old professor, a great one actually, the first lesson of penal law, right? And he entered the classroom, he slammed his papers on the table and said, no. And that is the first lesson of penal law that I will teach you. The power to say no. So that is also true for the security services, security and intelligence services. The power to say no. Of course, it's very difficult to say no to your political masters. It's very difficult to do so because you are accountable to them. They are the ones that are approving your budgets. Basically, they are the ones that they could make the difference between a happy life and a complicated life as a security service and inside the security service. So you have to keep that in mind. But still, you need to have the power to say no. And there are many ways in which you say no. You can say no. No, we don't have any data to support that claim. No, we still didn't finish our investigation. No, we have no signals to confirm it from our partners. No, we don't think that is the case. No is no. And that is not the first lesson in penal law. That is the first lesson in analytical independence, saying no. This is one way. The other way is to be very precise, very specific. The broader the question, the more precise and more specific the answer should be. Not like my presentation today. You shouldn't touch that many topics, use that many complicated words. Be very short, be very brief, be surgical, if you can, when you can. If you cannot do it, just say no.
Very interesting. I'm really sorry we are running out of time. You are all welcome to the coffee break that we have there in the terrace. And we are coming back at 12:30. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. We're going to start with our last speaker of this morning before lunch. We are the privilege and the honor to have here with us today Daniel Markic, who is the director of the ITSEN in the European Union. Last year, he was with us as well in the summer course. Thank you very much, Mr. Markic, for being here today with us. The floor is yours.
Buen día a todos. Es un placer estar aquí una vez más con amigos queridos. Quería agradecer a los organizadores por la invitación y la hospitalidad. Y quería agradecer a mis amigos del CNI que están aquí. El año pasado hemos hablado de la cooperación entre los servicios de inteligencia en Bruselas y del impacto de su trabajo en la Unión Europea. Hoy voy a hablar de una entidad muy específica que está dentro del INSEN. And before starting, I would like to thank the two previous speakers for the elements they gave us that was extremely interesting and that actually will help me present that very specific entity we have inside the INSEN. So in recent years, the topic of hybrid threat has been at the forefront of discussion within the European Union. And Christian gave a lot of elements, including historical element before and after 2014. So I would argue that the landscape shifted dramatically with the start of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. This pivotal moment forced us to re-examine our previous understanding about the nature of these threats. What we are seeing now is a disturbing reality. Russia is employing hybrid tactics in Ukraine in tandem with conventional military action. But it doesn't stop there. Here in Europe, we are witnessing increasingly aggressive attacks on our core values and decision-making processes. The threat is real, it is evolving, and it demands our attention and effective response. I am glad to have the opportunity today to present one of the elements of EU INSEN, the hybrid fusion cell, which I will refer later on as the HFC. My presentation will provide you with the insight into the mandate, focus, and output of this very specific entity inside the INSEN. At the EU level, it has the central coordinating role when it comes to early warning and situational awareness on hybrid threats. I will also explain how civilian and military cooperation works in practice when it comes to analyzing these multi-layer threats encompassing elements of both of these worlds, civilian and military. These slides represent the cooperation framework of the EU INSEN and the EU Military Staff Intelligence Directorate, with whom we work very closely. This working arrangement is commonly referred as the Single Intelligence Analysis Capacity, or SIAC. SIAC is the single entry point for intelligence in the EU, and it has a special status within the EU security architecture. Although the hybrid fusion cell is officially part of EU INSEN, it has a perfect living example of this cooperation, civilian and military. As hybrid threats targets a range of domains, including military and space, it is of utmost importance that analysts of the civilian and military intelligence analytical structures of the EU work together. This working framework ensures through assessment of the current and political threat to the EU, its member states and its interests. The EU Hybrid Fusion Cell combines civilian and military expertise, and its work is built on contribution provided by civilian and military intelligence and security services of the EU, so which includes the former service of Christian, SRI, or the CNI, and all the other. It's a community of around 70 services. It is essential that the EU decision makers have a sufficient level of situational awareness to identify changes in the security environment related to hybrid activity. To effectively counter hybrid threats, it is important to ensure information exchange and intelligence sharing within the European Union with partners. The need to share information and intelligence on hybrid threats is in a secure and timely fashion was the driver and the rationale behind the creation of the cell as a body within the INSEN in 2016. At the EU level, the cell is the leading entity for building common understanding and comprehensive situational awareness on hybrid threats. And that's why I'm very thankful to the previous two speakers. They gave you a picture of what an hybrid threat is. The cell is reporting has informed a number of EU policy debates and future plans. Its reporting covers hostile activities and strategic objectives of state and non-state hybrid actors and their targets. In addition, it focuses on key events in Europe and other regions that may trigger an increase in hybrid threats. The threats covered by the team are either manifesting within the Union or affecting the EU neighborhood or relating to EU strategic activities and interests. Here I would like also to stress that the cell mandate is limited to analyzing external aspects of hybrid threats. Moreover, we do not provide political recommendation, but which I gladly do when I'm in a room with some decision makers in Brussels. So our customers, despite the fact that the EU INSEN is part of the European External Action Service, the range of clients for analytical reporting on hybrid threat is much broader. In addition to providing situational awareness on hybrid threats, indicators and warnings, the main objective of the cell is to provide timely and relevant all-source strategic analysis for decision makers in the EES, in the European Commission, in the Council, and in the Member States. In practice, this materializes in form of a written analytical production and verbal briefings to EU leadership and policymakers. As multi-layer are the hybrid threats, and we heard the multi-layer of hybrid threats mentioned a few times, so is our hybrid fusion cell. Engagement with stakeholders. Let me explain the infographic projected at the center of this slide. Member States' intelligence community is the core pillar here. Without the trust of the intelligence and security services and their contribution to our analytical reporting, we would not be able to provide throughout assessment of the threats and ensure that the decision makers are well informed about the adversary's strategies, objectives, methods, and even plans to target the EU and its member states in the future. Hybrid threat can affect a range of sectors, from diplomacy to economy, cyber, information, even space. In this context, multiple complementary initiatives and cooperation formats were established, enabling actors representing different fields come together. Consistent with this approach, the cell is leading several networks of designated point of contact at the EU and national level to foster information sharing and improve situational awareness. To name a few, we work collaboratively with colleagues tackling from foreign information manipulation, dealing with cybersecurity, critical infrastructure resilience, and many more. Member States established government-level, capital-based national point of contact on hybrid threats to ensure cooperation with the hybrid fusion cell. These point of contacts act as two-way conducts for information. They send relevant information to the cell and receive our analytical products. Moreover, a range of subject matter experts from the EAS, the Commission services, and the Council are designated as point of contact for exchanges with the hybrid fusion cell. So this is the specificity of the hybrid fusion cell. In CEN, in general, we work with intelligence and security services of the member states. The hybrid fusion cell has a more broader type of cooperation that does not exclusively include intelligence services. Policymakers benefit from this cooperation as they are building initiatives in response to hybrid threats based on solid, comprehensive, analytical background. Notably, the hybrid fusion shall also cooperate closely with EU entities dealing with cybersecurity, such as ENISA, Europol, and CERT-EU, to report on cyber threat. As we understand now, the cyber world is one of the main field of battle for hybrid activities. The Hybrid Fusion Cell regularly briefs Council working groups dealing with hybrid and cyber threats, critical infrastructure protection, and resilience. Other key partners are NATO, the Hybrid Center of Excellence. This cooperation involves regular staff-to-staff exchanges and other forms of engagement, such as common participation in hybrid exercises. Hybrid tactics are intentionally designed to create confusion and to hide the real malign intent of the actor. Although an action may seem to be lawful, when combined and used in synchronization with other actions, they start to create an effect that harms and undermines the democratic state system, sovereignty and functionality, the target state, organization, or an alliance. By their nature, hybrid tools are selected in accordance to current social and political situations. Sometimes the real actor behind the action fades into the background, and if the same actor is active in several different domains, connecting the dots is often impossible. Moreover, intelligence services and special forces often play a crucial role when it comes to planning, supporting, or even coordinating hybrid activities. They are ideal tools to coordinate subversive actions and fomenting political unrest. Even if the activity is noticed, connecting it to a threat is far from easy. In this case, intelligence may be paramount. In this context, the cell conducts analytical reporting on hybrid actors' strategies, capabilities, and intent. Moreover, based on voluntary input from member states, intelligence security services, the cell conducts regular analysis of hybrid incidents taking place on the territory of the EU. This range through various domains and involve non-conventional methods. All of the HFC reporting provides an outlook section. It covers the potential evolution of the threats and provides intelligence-based assessment to support policy making and building counter-hybrid strategy at the EU level. In recent years, the topic of hybrid threat has been discussed frequently in various formats and by experts from different backgrounds. Still, one common definition of this threat does not exist due to their rapid evolvement as well as actors' specificities. In the case of hybrid threat, one definition does not apply to a device range of action that can be conducted and often unidentified until after the desired destructive effect is achieved. Hybrid techniques, as well explained by Christian, are not new. But the new modern reality has added new tools and new technologies to the hybrid actors' toolbox. Moreover, it provides them with the new ways to reach broad audiences and escape responsibility for malign actions. The conceptual definition of hybrid threat is mentioned in the 2016 Joint Framework on Countering Hybrid Threats. The Hybrid Fusion Cell assesses hybrid activity in 13 domains, aligned with the conceptual model of the European Commission's Joint Research Center and the Hybrid Center of Excellence. This slide presents some of the domains most frequently targeted by malign hybrid actors in the EU and illustrates their interconnections. In addition, no one would argue that infrastructure domain has been increasingly targeted in recent years, taking into account, for example, acts of sabotage and aimed at disruption of services and member state support to Ukraine. We have a lot of examples. So we have a Russian kinetic aggression in Ukraine, but Russia and their services and their special forces are organizing malign action inside some of the EU member states. And we have a clear picture of it, coming back to earlier question about the capabilities of EU intelligence, of knowing what's happening. On this slide, you can see types of production that the FAC, the hybrid fusion cell, produces. These include classified and unclassified reports resulting from our clients' requests, stemming from our pre-planned work program, or reflecting priorities of the rotating presidencies of the Council of the EU. Moreover, when it comes to early warning, the cell receives unrequested inputs from the member states' services, which are later used to inform decision makers in a timely manner. This and the following two slides are dedicated to present our engagement in support of decision making at the Council. Following the adoption of the Strategic Compass for Security and Defense in March 22, the EU established an EU hybrid toolbox. This toolbox comprises the preventive, cooperative, stability building, restrictive, and support measures as set out in the Council conclusion on a framework for a coordinated EU response to hybrid campaigns. The purpose of the toolbox is help identify complex and multifaceted hybrid campaigns, coordinate tailor-made and cross-sectoral responses. Hereby, SIAC, in particular, the hybrid fusion cell, plays a central role contributing to the decision-making processes by providing strategic foresight and comprehensive situational awareness. This applies also to cyber diplomacy toolbox, set up to respond to cyber threat and attacks, and the foreign information manipulation and interference toolbox, so-called FIMI toolbox. With this slide, I would like to briefly present to you our flagship product, the Hybrid Trends Analysis, or the HTA. We issued the last one a week ago. The HTA is an annual classified analytical report providing situational awareness on hybrid threat to the EU member states, EU institutions, bodies and agencies, as well as CSDP missions and operations. It is based on national responses comprising intelligence inputs and other relevant information, as well as contribution by EU entities and CSDP mission and operations. The HTA is a complementary tool used to monitor hybrid threats and assess their impact in the course of the previous year. It informs EU decision makers about the scale and intensity of hybrid threats and provide insight into the potential evolution in the upcoming 12 months. The last slide gives you a glimpse into the topics that HFC covers in their daily work. First and foremost, it is hybrid activities to the EU stemming from the war in Ukraine and aimed at diminishing EU support to Kyiv. Secondly, cyber activity functions as a core pillar of hybrid activities against the EU, designed to destabilize democracies and fracture European unity. Malign state actors continue to conduct cyber attacks in parallel of information operations, physical sabotage, and political interference. 2025 marked an increase in drone incident in the EU member states. As for the Eastern neighborhood, among other hybrid activities, recent election in Armenia was targeted by a widespread disinformation campaign. These and other topics have been high on the agendas of the decision makers in the EU and featured in the analysis of this year's HFC. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that the topic of hybrid threat is of utmost relevance in today's reality, where the boundaries between war and peace and between state and non-state actors are becoming increasingly blurred. To effectively address hybrid threat, EU decision makers need a robust understanding of evolving security dynamics. To date, it is evident that the demand for the work of the HFC is increasing in parallel with the threat evolution. The impact of the hybrid fusion cell activities was noted on multiple occasions. Therefore, I am certain that the work of the cell will remain relevant in the foreseeable future. This concludes my presentation. I am very open to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marcus. Thank you. Any questions over there?
First of all, thank you very much for your conference. It was really interesting. And well, my question is more general about the intelligence system in the European Union. Do you think that with the new challenges, there must be a new intelligence community or a development of the intelligence center situation?
Thank you.
Sure, I'm deeply convinced that we have to evolve, we have to get better. There is one very important element to take into account. So if you take the Treaty of the European Union, you take the Article 4.2, where it's written that national security is the remit of the member states, and this is very important. So until the treaty is changed, we know how intelligence is being acquired. And even if it was not the case, the sources are using the most intrusive tools to get intelligence. It requires specific people, specific equipment, specific knowledge. All the things at the EU level would be impossible to do. But still, we have to evolve in the EU, and especially in CEN as the single entry point for intelligence, to be able to respond to these challenges. And actually all these state and non-state, especially the state malign actors, are very proud of using intelligence against us. So we do not shy away, we should not shy away of using ours against them. And on this, I would like to come back to Christian's presentation, because I'm one of the person in the EU that is convinced that we have to respond, because I completely agree that now some of the actors, they are not hiding anymore. They are very open. The fact that we know that it's them, they don't care. So definitely the member states and the EU and NATO, we are in the capacity to do more, and for that we have to develop more.
Any more questions? We're here.
So, well, let me challenge you, following from your answer. So, move over to your Lords and Masters. Sorry. So, let me identify myself. Fernando Nogales, I'm going to speak. I'm a diplomat working for the Foreign Ministry. So, if you are convinced that the EU has to respond, could you be, or are you in a position to suggest to your political masters a range of options on how to respond beyond the current toolbox that ends at the sanction levels?
Sure, and actually
let's say a range of options that could be acceptable to the broad range of democratic realities in the different member states. Thank you.
So obviously there is always obstacle. It's not so easy, even at the national level, and we heard it before this morning, the difference between the position of intelligence and the people that are doing policy. So it's not necessarily the same point of view. Secondly, one of the numerous issues at the EU level is the need of unanimity. So obviously, if you want to respond to a foreign threat and you need unanimity, it's not very easy. But we're in the capacity of giving the element for the debate, and we help actually, and that's why, for example, now as director of INCEN, I brief regularly the FAC, so the Ministers of Foreign Affairs. So we giving them specific intelligence and hopefully helping them to take strong decision. But I would still like to mention one very successful tool, sanctions. Sanctions. So if the EU has a strong tool, those are sanctions. So first we had to fight against the narrative that the sanctions are inefficient. So obviously the sanctions didn't stop the Russian aggression, but it's hitting them badly, very badly, and long term. And especially since we have been integrating intelligence over the last year on sanctions, it's being hugely successful. So obviously it will take time, but it's one of the great tools the EU has and is using against one very bad malicious actor.
Any more questions? I would like to ask you a question. We got time still. How the question? Let's see. How the European Union is because we are seeing now that the European Union is seeking for strategic autonomy. Is trying to work together with others when possible and alone if not possible. We are trying to develop industry of defense. How intelligence is adjusting in all these political words relating with strategic autonomy and things like that. When you say, and is being presented here, that intelligence within the European Union is related with those information on intelligence that the states are giving out to the European Union and putting together.
So my predecessor, Christian, must have been a great speaker because I will quote him again. Thank you for coming, Christian. So as he mentioned, actually the intelligence services, despite at the EU level, when you see at political level some feuds between some of the countries, it's not happening so often at the intelligence level. So we more or less have a similar view of the threats. And obviously, this is very understandable. So we are 27 democracies with the democratic cycles and elections, and policymakers, they have to take all of this into account. So I'm the first one to understand very clearly when some of the elements I'm giving are not being used. So on the field of intelligence, we are, I think, on the right path. Hopefully, that's more hope as a citizen. Europe will organize more to be stronger, and that's the goal of the next European security strategy, for each activities that the EU is developing, for each of its activity to have I would say, a security side on it, a security option. So the EU is understanding that it's not only a political and economical actor, but it's a global power, maybe seen as a weak one, but it's a global power. And for example, we'll have the NATO summit in Turkey in a few days. It's being asked by our main ally to organize more, to be more stronger, to be able to defend ourselves more. So hopefully we'll be able to do it.
Very good. Good answer. Any more questions? No questions? Javier over here.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, for your exposition. It's just a very short question. It's about the coordination with NATO. How important is that? How important that both organizations are together fighting hybrid threats, and you as Chair of the Intelligence of the European Union, what can you explain us about how's the coordination, not only about hybrid threats, but about the intelligence itself between the IPU in NATO and your INSEN? Thank you.
So we have, and I have exceptional cooperation with the Assistant Secretary General of NATO for Intelligence Security, Scott Bray. Our teams have excellent relation, but there is limitation that are not due to us or to the IPU and people doing intelligence security question in NATO. It's due to, it's more at the political level, and there is some differences, different type. There are a lot of countries are both EU and NATO. Some of them are just in EU or NATO, and sometimes there are obstacles that are for us we cannot pass, unfortunately. But as the logic would show to us, hopefully one day we'll be able to pass all these obstacles, because at that moment, if we achieve that, we would be really able, all of us, to tackle all these hybrid threats and malicious actors.
Thank you. Any more question? One over there.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, sir, for this brief yet enlightening presentation. I would like to ask if, among the many points that you have mentioned that have now or are now understood as a hybrid threat coming from malignant external elements, one of them is political interference. And we have, as you have mentioned, seen throughout the last 2 years a lot of such cases inside mainly of the European, let's say, periphery, like the Moldovan or the Armenian case. But now, for example, seeing that some core members of the European Union, such as, for example, Germany, where their own intelligence services have even suggested that some previously fringe, but now seemingly very important political parties and some political elements may be too aligned with some external threats such as Russia. Is there an idea or a project or a common sense between European intelligence services that there may need to be created some kind of common guidelines or a common image of what a malignant political threat inside of the European Union may be and how to tackle them? Thank you.
Oh, this is really a difficult question, especially in democracies where people have the right to think and whatever they like to think. But we, again, and coming back to the previous speakers, that's why we have to identify the real facts that are happening to be able to try to answer to these challenges. So yes, outside of the EU, you mentioned it, we had Armenia, Georgia, Moldavia, where the EU had to, I would say, had to play a role, and quite successfully. We have the Western Balkans. But let's not forget, we had incredible example in the EU. I think was, for me, the most fascinating example is in Romania, but I will not say too much, as our colleague has all the details, and I might not be able to get out of the room after that. But it's quite exceptional, I must say, that based on data given by the intelligence service to the policymakers, that an election was cancelled. This is quite incredible. And if the decision makers decided to do that, you can only imagine the elements they had in front of them. And this is quite an exceptional example. And you have other elements when, for example, I think the German Internal Security Service, BFV, mentions some of the actually very popular parties in some of their documents. So again, this is a very, very difficult question to answer. And quite a huge challenge for the future, for the 27 member states, starting with 2027 and the big elections coming. We have to be, all our senses have to be on, I would say.
Any more questions? Last chance? No? So thank you very much, very interesting. We are finishing here the morning session. We are coming back here at 3 o'clock. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. 3 o'clock.